Welcome back to my channel and my shop. So we're going to do an episode today of a segmented duck. There's a little fella in his little yellow boots. So on top there I have one that I've already cut out on the bandsaw. So we'll be laminated the segmented pieces in the center of the two boards. So there it is there. I'll just take it and chop that off. And so the piece that I use that is segmented, it's 1 inch by 1 inch pieces, and that'll give you a 1 inch piece, and then 1.5 inches on either side. And what I'm using is cypress and cedar. So the dark is cedar and the white is cypress. Cypress is a really nice carving wood. Some people call it yellow cedar, but it's a cypress. So I'm not too sparing on the glue. You really want this not to have any voids in it, or whenever you're carving it, you'll notice it. So put in lots of clamps, lots of pressure, and then I'll get it all situated and leave it overnight. And once I leave it overnight, I'll get it all cleaned up. And so there's the next day, and you can see the blocks all cleaned up. What I do is sand it and then run it on the jointer. It's important when you're doing a three-dimensional cutout on your bandsaw that you have it square and two sides anyways. And there's my pattern. So what I've done is laid out a center mark. And I'm just lining up my pattern. So that's the side profile. I go over it several times to make sure that I have a nice dark mark. And there it is there. And then I'll make another mark at the tail portion there. So I'm going to lay up my back portion. So on a three-dimensional piece, you want a side profile and a back profile. And what I'm doing is just making some marks here for the center. I want my carving to be balanced with that going right down the center. You don't want it offside or anything, so you'll be using that as your gauge line when you're carving up to it. So just get these marks done, and then we'll go on to the next portion of it. Now what we want to do is use packing tape and tape it up good. Pull the packing tape nice and tight, and I'll tape it both ways. I'll go all the way around and then from end to end. And once I cut the side profile, I'll have to retape it back on, and then we'll cut out the back profile. And this is what will give you a three-dimensional cut on your carving piece. You just wrap lots of tape on it. There you go. Over the bandsaw now, and like I was saying, so the first thing we want to do is cut out that side profile. You're cutting out the silhouette, so just follow that all the way around. I like to use a 1/4 inch blade, 4-tooth. I use that for a lot of things. That's my go-to. You don't have to get too awful close to the line here because you'll be carving to it, but it just gives you a good reference. And a 1/4 inch blade works good for the radiuses on this project. I just drew this up myself. I came up with a couple of profiles I was happy with, and then went from there with the size. I imagine you could find some stuff online for silhouettes and stuff, but I just sketched this out. You can do any of the patterns that you wanted to, as long as you had a front profile and a back profile. And what I usually do too is whenever I'm coming up with a new pattern, I'll I'll just cut it out of foam just to save a lot of time and material. So I'll fabricate a chunk of foam together that I'm wanting to carve out, and then I'll cut that out in the bandsaw. And then if I find that I took off too much or not enough, it's easier to refine. And that's actually what I did with this project. I cut up a chunk of high density foam and then refined it and cut it out. Foam's pretty cheap. If you're getting a big screen TV, save the foam that's in the box and just glue it together to the size of the block you need. So here we are. So I've taped all the pieces back on, and now just raising the fence there. Once we get the fence raised, we'll just follow it all the way along and cut it out. You can see that I've got a bit of a dust storm going there. I forgot to turn on the dust collector, but that shows you that I'm actually cutting it, I guess. You can see how important it is to tape the sides on good, because you don't want them popping off or moving on you while you're cutting this out. We just round up the top of the beak there, and we'll follow all the way down through the side and do the exact same thing to cut it out. You see my blade is starting to burn a bit. I've probably done about 10 or 12 ducks on this blade, so that's actually pretty good. And you can see why it's important to have your block square. You need those 90-degree corners because you're going from one side to the other. And if your block wasn't square, even though your bandsaw is set up square, and you should check that too before you start. Just do a check in your blade. It's important that everything's going to run through true. And I'm just following through there. Got my blade stuck there. It's turned off my saw and just shook her out. I'll get her going again. There it is. Once we get these pieces out, and then I'll be able to, if you notice how the base is just sitting on the bottom, so it's cradled in there. There's the piece there after we've taken the sides and the back off, and now you can start to see the form of the duck. You can see the back and the sides and the segmented pieces going all the way down. And then we'll take it over and we'll start the sanding process now. So there's the tools I start with. I've been using an air grinder, and I use a coarse cutter to do my profiles and stuff. And I'll just they'll do the peaks in, and on the top of the head, when I use my 1-inch cord to the center, and I actually bring the head to it. It's just doing some marks down the center again. There's no real way of measuring it here. You have to just sort of look at it and turn around and sort of balance them out by eye. But these tools that you get now, this one here, the tool that I like to use in the grinder there is you can go both ways. It's double cut, so it's a double cut edge, right and left. Then I start on the head portion first, because you have a nice big square body to work with. So I always refine the head first, work on the beak, and I'll come down to the throat. And the important thing on them is the jaws. So I want to make sure that the jaws are balanced on both sides. Just take a little bit off. And if you're using these power tools, you've got to be careful of getting caught on the end of those small pieces. Now you use a foam block there. You can see that I can rest myself on. So here I modified this is actually a welding sander or a sander that's used in auto body. But I took off the flat support on the bottom and the back guard off, and I actually loosened up the tension on it as well. I took a bit out of the spring so that I can get some movement on the sanding belt. And I sand from the backside because I want the soft edge, so I want the belt actually to curve in a bit. And it's a great tool for this kind of stuff. And I'll go back to shaping it again with the grinder. And it just does your profile for you. Like I said, I detailed the head first and I work down from there. And then I'll use the bigger tools. But as I was saying earlier, you can see I have that block of foam there, and it's great because you can lay your product on there and you're not going to scratch it up, and you can put some pressure on it. And just checking the balance of it there. You can see how important the segmented pieces are there, go right down through the center. I keep using that as my guide mark. And what I was checking there, that's a sander I'll be putting on the drill press, and I use that for the inner side of the throat. That's my radius, so I just take it off and I use it there to make sure that I'm carved back enough. So now I'm just taking off some product with the grinder. I believe I've got a 80 grit, might be a 60 grit on that. And this is the tool that works best for me. You can take off a lot of product in a hurry. And I've got a big fan behind me. You can see all the dust blowing away. So as I'm doing this, I turn on the fan and everything is blown away from me. You get a little bit of dust on you. Actually, you probably get a lot on you, but it's good to blow it away. You'll notice that I go back and forth different tools a lot. There it is again, and if you notice that sander, I actually use the back side of it, and so that sanding belt can actually bend over the wood, because I want nice soft contours. But if you're a carver and you do a lot of these carvings, this is a tool that's well worth investment in. I use it a lot. Belts are cheap too. What I actually do is just buy a standard belt sander belt, and then just cut it 1 inch wide and tear it apart. It's a cheaper way than buying a lot of the belts. So there's some tools and some paper. So what I've done is I've roughed it all to size. I didn't bring it through the entire process, but use an array of tools, and then once I get to that, then I'll start to hand sand it, and I'll carve different areas of it to pull off the sides, to contour it. And so what I have there is just a dowel that's wrapped in about 60 grit sandpaper, and then I put different grits over top of it. But if I have to take off more product, I'll just use the 60 grit that's underneath it. But just some tack spray glue and on a piece of dowel, and wrap your sandpaper, and it works great for this. You see there it is there. I just want to take those scratches out from the machines. Now I can go back to 120, and I'll just soften that all out. And I bring these, I'll sand these all down. And I have different blocks with different things on them for different heights. You can see that's just a piece of wood with a bit of non-skid glued to it. You see it's starting to come together. But I'll sand these down to 220. That'll be my final sand. So I'll just keep on refining them, and like I said, there's no measurements that you can do. You just have to keep on turning it around, and you want to feel the your carving as well. It gives you a real tactile feel to it with those soft edges and stuff. So, but people hate sanding. I actually enjoy it. You can actually see the product come to life. You can soften up the edges. I actually use that round dowel. That's a 1-inch dowel wrapped in 60 grit. Use it a lot throughout the carving. Works good on all the edges, and then you can put some finer sandpaper on it and soften everything up. Like I said, once I'm done with these two, then I'll go over it with 150 and then 180. Here I am with 150, I'll just give it a... Now I just start hand sanding. And you really, at this point, want to take time to make sure that there's no sanding scratches or anything in it. This is where it'll shine through. If there's any areas where you want to take more out, but take the time and go through all the grits too. Don't jump your grits, just go through them. That's the only way you'll get the scratches. So just doing the final sand here and checking all over to make sure that there's no scratches or anything left in it. And then after we do that, I give it a coat of sanding sealer. And I do this regardless if I paint it or if I'm going to lacquer it. Give it a good coat, and then after that I'll sand it to 220. And this will fill all the voids, especially in the end grain that's going down the back of the duck, the segmented pieces. So here's the ducks after they're done. This one's had about 4 coats of lacquer on it. And you can see I painted the eyes in it and put on some yellow boots in it. And I just used a 3/8 dowel there for the yellow boots. So it came out quite nice, especially this segmented portion. Thanks a lot for watching, and please subscribe and check out the rest of the videos. And I'm glad that you joined me in my shop today. Hope to see you again on the next project.